This is the Shades of Green radio show, featuring the latest in technology, money-saving ideas, legislative updates, and all things green. The Shades of Green radio show is presented by the Green Alliance. Now here's your hosts, Paul Ira and Stan Hannell.
Good morning. This is Shades of Green radio show, simulcast on KDWN 720 AM and KDWN 101.5 FM, the only talk radio FM in La Valley. Our show today is produced by Green Alliance of Nevada and sponsored by NV Energy, and I am your host, Paul Ira. In studio today, we have Scott Seastrand, Vice President of Western Elite, and we're going to talk about the recycling they do, and of course, we have Stan Hannell from Drive Clean Las Vegas. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Paul.
So, Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself and what makes you green, and what is all this green work your company's doing?
Thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. We at Western Elite are in mainly the construction and waste hauling business. We divert approximately 165,000 tons of material that would be put into a landfill, but instead is able to be put back into the recycling stream that we're able to reuse the materials. We've got a lot of details on how we handle it, but basically we handle material from cradle to grave and do a lot of work here in the Las Vegas area.
So as we say in Las Vegas, when you get old, they either shoot you or tear you down. So you're working in that second part, I guess, and when they take a building apart, you're there to clean it up.
Absolutely.
Make sure it doesn't end up in a landfill, or all of it doesn't end up in a landfill anyway.
Yeah, so what we end up doing is we operate either direct trucks that are hauled or mainly dumpsters that are put out on sites. And that can be done for construction companies that are doing any kind of construction project or landscapers. But additionally, as you've mentioned, if you take down a whole building, there's just a ton of material that has a lot of reusability in steel or concrete or other elements. And so contractors, demolition contractors will come in and take the building down, but they utilize us to have it loaded and have it hauled off, and then we take it to one of our material recovery facilities where we're able to segregate the material. We're then able to put it back usually into a building utilization.
Great. How many people does your company employ?
Right now, we're really close to 260 full-time employees.
And that's all here in Las Vegas?
It is a combination of our own landfill that we operate, as well as our two material recovery facilities. We have approximately 100 trucks on the road every day.
I was going to say, if you're taking recycling from buildings, you got to have a lot of trucks. So a lot of your employees are drivers?
Absolutely.
And where does this material go?
Well, we have two material recovery facilities. One's in the northeast part of the valley. The other one's really close to the Strip, which is on Wynn Road, just between Tropicana and Flamingo. And that's where the material starts to go. I mean, once we pick it up, if we have a dumpster out, and in fact, residential homes, we think in really, really large terms, but a lot of our customers are just personal residences where people are doing a remodel job, or they are having maybe their sod ripped out or whatever their landscaping issue might be. We are then able to put out a dumpster for them, and those then go to our recovery facilities. We then segregate what we can, and in the end, what we can't, we end up landfilling.
Do all these kind of dumpsters go to a recycling, or do...
In our case, yes. The only thing that would really be an exception would be we have some customers that we work with that deal with asbestos, and when we haul off some kind of remediation project for maybe a contractor, that we have to take directly out to the landfill because there's not a recycling component involved there, and we have a lot of health requirements in order to make sure it's safely taken care of.
Almost like a hazmat situation where you're careful handling of the materials.
Yes,
right? Yeah.
So it's got a little different process in which we have to handle it. But everything else we do take to our material recovery facilities, and that's the one confidence that you can have, with Western Elite, is that we're going to, in fact, do what we can to segregate as much material as we possibly can.
Well, I had a new roof put on my house, and I thought it was way too big of a dumpster, but I ended up filling it up. What happens to all that kind of stuff, like roofing materials, old shingles and things?
Well, most of the time, in our case, there's not, for, let's say, asphalt shingles, which is typical. That particular material is not one that we're in a position, or I'm not sure if it's even being recycled, nationally, but we don't have any source here close. So that's one area that, as I say, some of it can be recycled, some of it doesn't. It still comes to get repackaged at our material recovery facility, but unfortunately, we're not recycling asphalt shingles at this point.
Okay, I would think that would be a great fuel source for something. Anyway, so
one neat thing about your company is your dumpsters are really unique. They're like a bright blue, and they come in all different sizes for residential homes as well.
That's correct. You know you're dealing with Western Elite and our recycling capacity when you see a great big giant WE on the side.
All right.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, I've seen those. I'm sure people will recognize them now as they're driving around. So where, for example, concrete, what happens to that?
Concrete is a very usable, recyclable. In our valley, most of it, there's several concrete crushing companies here in town, and depending on which one's closest to one of our facilities, we're able to segregate it off. We're able to haul it to them, and they then the process of that is that they then go through a particular crushing method that takes it back. And I'll use a terminology of type 2, which is a pretty familiar base that is put down under roads or maybe pads. And when they have gone through their whole process of reworking it, they're able to turn it into a type 2 sand product or gravel product that is generally used in our construction. So it reduces having to remine it, and we're in a position then as a valley that we're, being able to build some of our roads on top of maybe the Riviera Hotel that once existed.
They feel much smoother that way.
Yeah.
So instead of producing new road base, if you will, you just crush up old concrete and use that instead.
Yeah, and in fact, and I'm not sure exactly the process of how they finalize it, but that's exactly what's done and made. Interesting
stuff. We'll talk more about this when we come back to Shades of Green on KDWN. We'll be right back. Well, we're back to Shades of Green on KDWN 720 AM and 101.5 FM in Las Vegas. Our show is produced by Green Alliance and sponsored by NV Energy. We have Scott Seastrand, Vice President of Western Elite, in the studio, and we're talking recycling big stuff, concrete, steel, big buildings. Tell us about maybe one of your most interesting projects. What kind of big building have you recycled?
Well, let's see. And I don't even know the name of it, but there was a project just down on Main Street that was just torn down here in the last, I think it's been over the last 2 or 3 months, and I can't remember I hate to name the hotel that came down in case I named the wrong one, but it's being redeveloped right there. So that was a very recent one that came down and was, redone. Mm-hmm. Other interesting places that we are right now that I think everybody knows about the Raiders Stadium, right?
I've heard about that.
Yeah. So we are handling some of the waste out there at the Raiders Stadium right now. And again, all of the material that we haul off is going to go through our process of recycling what we can out of it.
That's great. And we talked about taking concrete and crushing it, using it for road base, which I assume they lay concrete on top of that. How about the steel? Where does the steel go?
Well, the steel is packaged up, and normally we don't directly deal with vendors in Los Angeles, but that's the main area where the West Coast, sends their steel. And we have local companies that we work with that we work a financial arrangement with them as we provide the steel for them. Because in truth, it costs money in order to actually segregate the material. So the commodities themselves, if you've got an operation that's functional, you've got to be able to pay for it. So to keep it sustaining, as we like to use those terms, and in that process, we're able to get a wholesale rate on the steel that we provide, and then they package it up and send it to California. Where it goes from there, I'm not sure. I know some of it's gone foreign. Other of it is utilized here, locally.
So you can reuse some of this stuff directly?
Well, no, I think it goes back to, new smelting places.
Majority of it then is getting smelted.
Yeah, I believe it goes back and it's repurposed.
And then how about the internal stuff, finishes like doors, windows, granite, concrete? Not concrete, but marble and that kind of thing.
Most of that stuff is the stuff that ends up getting disposed. I mean, what has to happen is, as we evolve as a community or even nationally on having facilities that actually specialize in some of these areas, and there will always be a growing, I'm going to say, commodity base of what can be used. But again, it has to pencil. You have to be able to economically be able to pull it out and repurpose it and be able to sell it again, or you're not going to be able to make the cycle run very long. So some of those
must be sustainable, right?
It must be sustainable. So
from a business standpoint,
correct. And so ultimately, some of those things are going to have to be expanded. We're not doing as much as we could as a country in general, because we have to have the investment into some of these areas that, well, I'll give you an example, like car tires. Right now, car tires can be ground up and turned into a playground material and so forth, but we produce in the United States more road tires than we can actually use crumb rubber, which is what they've used. So you've got a pile of tires that's this high, and yet the use of crumb rubber's much lower, so some of it still gets disposed.
I thought most of them went to Springfield and got burned on The Simpsons.
Well, and if they do catch on fire, we all know what kind of smoke they make.
Yeah, that's a never-ending fire on The Simpsons. So that's where most of our tires go. How about, so some company probably comes in ahead of time and takes out the finishes if there's I've heard of stores that sell old casino.
Recycled.
Yeah, there probably are. And we deal, Paul, in such a large process where we're mainly putting containers out, and the actual user of the construction site is actually putting the stuff in our containers. So prior to us getting involved, there are other companies that are actually, I'm going to say, retailing some of these finishes. I mean, I've heard of stores that go in and actually salvage, and that's the term I would use, salvage some of those parts, and they're able to resell them and reuse them. In our case, we don't go through that because we're dealing with such huge volumes. We're dealing with massive containers that are filled. Much of that, we're going for the bigger items that we're able to do.
So I got to believe the majority of what you're recycling is concrete and steel.
That's probably tonnage-wise the most. I would say the next would be either cardboards or plastics that come off the job sites.
Okay. So packaging and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of cardboard being used. It's amazing. I just built a new kitchen, and I'm still dealing with the cardboard. The kitchen's all done, but I still have cardboard laying around, all the boxes. And
those are IKEA you're using
IKEA cabinets and tons of cardboard, literally. So I can see where that. What are they doing with cardboard?
Well, that's just the same thing. They're taking it and repurposing again.
Shred it.
They shred it down and make paper again, may even make cardboard boxes again.
It's a big industry, big industry. How about, I see here that you had the Western Elite Youth Fund. Tell us about that.
We have an operation in Lincoln County, which is just north of Clark County, and we found that there was a lot of areas that the youth up in Lincoln County weren't getting funded just because of the size of the county. And so we created a youth fund that we worked with the county commission with there, and we're able to then fund some different projects. We've done some Boy Scout things, some agricultural type youth activities, rodeos. We've sponsored kids to go back to Washington, D.C. I can't remember them all, but those are the kinds of things that we have been able to do, and I think it's been very beneficial for the youth involved.
And I think with local schools, you're mentioning you're involved in education about recycling with a lot of schools here in Las Vegas.
We are involved with a I believe it's we make a donation to a activity that they do, some kind of a prize that they offer. It's a scholarship, and by doing that, we're not only participating as one of the recyclers at the school district, where we put out containers that the youth or the students there learn how to put out and segregate themselves, but we're able to then not only process that material that they put out, but then we're also involved with sponsoring a scholarship that helps pay for some other schooling on that topic.
That's good stuff. We'll talk about some of the programs that you're doing in the schools and how they compete against one another to win those recycling contests. We'll be right back to Shades of Green on KDWN. We're back to Shades of Green on KDWN 720 AM and 101.5 FM simulcast here in Las Vegas. Our show is produced by Green Alliance of Nevada and sponsored by NV Energy, and I'm your host, Paul Ira. We have Scott Seastrand, Vice President of Western Elite Recycling, in studio, and we're talking about all the different pieces and parts they pull down from buildings and what have you, and crushing concrete into new road base and taking steel and having it resmelted into steel parts that Stan then puts in his electric cars with any luck. So how about the other things that come out of these places, like the food scraps? There's got to be a ton of that. Do you deal with that product as well?
Thank you, Paul. We do, and where most of that food scraps comes from is from our resort corridor. We have, who knows when we're occupying the amount of hotel rooms we have here, but the tonnage of food that's maybe, I've heard the number, 40% of the food ends up being wasted or disposed of, and we like to call it scraps because it's utilized by us. And one of the things that we do, we participate with different programs at some hotels, and we take the food scraps, we divide it up into different categories. One of the things that we operate with the food scraps is we feed pigs at our pig farm, and what that does is it creates a whole ecosystem if, in fact, we have a certain kind of food that we can feed to them that's segregated. And then other types of food that we can't feed to pigs, we're able to mix with our green waste that's mulched up, and we're using it for a compost. One of the challenges that you have when you generate as much green waste as we do in this valley is being able to do something productive rather than simply putting it into a landfill. Much of it does go in, but a lot of it is now being composted where we're able to turn it back into a soil amendment. But you have to have a strong nitrogen source in order to make that happen. Much of the food generates some of that. One of the goals that we have in the valley now that we're working with different city entities is to get the sludge byproduct that comes from the water reclamation department. And hopefully, maybe within the next 6 months, we may be actually taking some of that instead of that material that comes from the reclamation district, which is super high, probably the highest in nitrogen for anything. And utilizing into a way to break down the green waste and make a better compost that we can use for farmers in more northern Nevada or even in some parts of southern Nevada.
That's exciting, yeah. Rebuilding the desert here. You're converting the desert back into arable land.
It would stand to reason to use that for food source because when it comes out of the reclamation center, they actually call it cake. So it would be good to go back and turn it into food.
It's quite wet, but it isn't necessarily dripping. But that material is just a perfect, and it's used all over the country for this type of application where we can then, how ideal would it be that if we can haul off, instead of just landfilling it, we can haul off some of the sludge and compost it, turn it into a good soil amendment that could actually come back to our city and help fertilize some of our roadways, some of our parks, even have private landscapers be able to utilize it. And, we create the complete ecosystem of being able to utilize something.
Do you actually have compost for sale?
We do. What we end up having is most of our material right now is being used with local farmers in the area that we're doing the compost. And the reason for that is our volumes need to pick up. And if we could get the sludge, then we'd be in a position to be bringing more of it back into actual city of Las Vegas, which we're not starting yet because we have demand in different areas that are closer. But in the end, that is our goal. We want to be able to have the right product and bring it back into use in the city of Las Vegas.
That's great stuff. And there's a lot of places it can be used, and God knows we need nutrients for our soil here. I've got grass that's trying to grow, and it won't do anything. With the local soil, I don't see how anything grows at all.
Yeah.
It has to be amended. So that's great stuff.
Thank you.
I would like to come by and get some. I bought a piece of land that came with a house just so that I could do farming, if you will, urban farming. So I have a lot of work to do there now that I'm almost done with my house.
I know that, Paul, that the Springs Preserve does some composting right now, and I don't know if you can pick up some of their material that they have, but they have a kind of I'm going to call it a small eco project. We would be doing this in a massive way on acres and acres and acres of property, but in their case, they have some pretty interesting things that they do that if you go through their tours, they can show you, and you may be able to utilize some of the material that they're making now.
Sure, I'll give that a shot. And our listeners are always looking for green ways to improve their lives, so this is good. That's why I was wondering if you had it for sale, if people could come to a location and pick it up.
Coming to Las Vegas soon.
Soon. Stay tuned for a new composting. So how many employees did you say you have?
Well, we're nearly, the number goes up and down a little bit, but we're really close to about 260 full-time employees.
So it's a pretty good size operation. You've got people driving trucks and then people working the sites, I suppose, in supervision capacities, as well as the recycling on the other end once a truck's empty out.
We have divisions and all of that. The things that you would normally think about in the truck hauling, as well as at the material recovery facilities where we're receiving the material, as well as operating environmentally correct the landfill. And then you have all the other departments any large business handles, from our accounting departments to our sales teams that work with our customers, call center agents, and it goes on and on. So
you're growing all the time. Are you adding new jobs?
Yeah, and that's why I say I think we're right around 260 full-time. We all live in a wonderful growing area. We got hit pretty hard by the recession, but we're right now really, expanding back and growing back like Las Vegas has for many decades done very well. And now with the Raiders coming and other wonderful, new elements, the resort corridor obviously is a flagship for us and world renowned. And this, everybody we talk to looks like we're going to continue to expand and develop great jobs and careers. And outside of the Strip corridor, there's lots of development in the community that's going on, and a wonderful place to raise families. So I think a lot of people know that. And so, yes, as the valley grows, our company is poised to take care of what we do best, which is construction, waste, and recycling management of that material.
Any particular positions you're trying to fill right now?
I wish I could say I knew, but often we need truck drivers that have experience, particularly with roll-off trucks, and I just don't know a specific. I wish I don't deal in, again, all those departments. The HR department, I'm sure they're working on how they're filling some of that, but I do know that we do have openings all the time.
So people can find it at your website too, I think.
So what is your website?
So westernelite.com.
Wow, go figure. That's unique.
westernelite.com.
So if you've got a CDL and you're looking for work, go to Western Elite. See if they haven't got a job there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Come in and just like any place else, they'll evaluate you, and I hope you have a good opportunity to work for a good company.
Do you have inside jobs too?
Yeah, as I say, we have the call center that we deal with all of our customers on, full accounting department, full human resources department. We have a legal contracts department. We deal with pretty much anything that really large companies and operations have to deal with.
So a lot of different positions.
Absolutely.
So we'll talk more about this when we come back to Shades of Green on KDWN. We'll be right back. And we're back to Shades of Green on KDWN 720 AM and 101.5 FM here in Las Vegas. Show's produced by Green Alliance and sponsored by NV Energy. We have Scott Seastrand, Vice President of Western Elite Recycling, in studio with us, and we're talking about crushing concrete and turning steel beams into electric cars and recycling food waste for people and pigs. Also want to talk about some of the feel-good events that you have, your Christmas Express event. Tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you very much, Paul. That is an event I believe we're in our 8th year. I've kind of lost track in my mind. And it's by invitation. We put out invites to different groups. Last year, we had a total of 12,000 people come. It was all free of charge. And it's our way of giving back to the community here in Las Vegas. We entertain a lot of families and bring the Christmas spirit to a lot of people. What we do is at our ranch, the main event is a train ride to the North Pole where Santa Claus gets on the train with all the kids, gives them a gift. We have stops on the way, and it's not a 3 or 4 minute ride. It's a 30-minute ride. So when you finally get on the train, you actually get a great experience. I think part of that goes with it is that, it takes a couple of hours while you're there. We feed individuals. We have other kinds of activities, little kiddie rides as well as hay rides, and we take them around to see the farm animals and some of the things that we do in the recycling element. But I think it's the Christmas spirit that, is brought about that is probably the most lasting impression when people leave. The main thing that I wanted to share is that we have a Veterans Night, and we want to invite active duty personnel from Nellis Air Force Base or Creech and any former veterans that have served in the armed forces. We want to make space available for them. And we have a way of eventually we open up and send invitations out and other things, but we're a little early still. But we handle it the first 2 weekends in December, both Friday and Saturday nights. And we have a tremendous amount of people come out, and it does a lot of good for my heart when we have veterans that come and sometimes bring their families. I had one gentleman that lost his arm in service that just kind of sobered me up to realize the level of sacrifice that many do. And so we're thrilled to be able to put this activity that we can kind of give back to our community.
That's great stuff. And what happens during these events? What happens during your veterans event? What are you doing there?
Well, not too much different than our normal nights, but they show up and they're at the greeter area. We give them kind of a fast pass, what time they can get in line for the train. In the meantime, they can serve themselves the food that we have prepared there. Anybody that does come up, bring your coat because it's cold in December, even though it's hot nowadays, but by December it gets pretty cold. And so the only element is that we get them out of town a little bit. It's about an hour drive to get out to our ranch, but then when they get out there, they'll see that there's thousands of people there, and it's a great event to be able to spend some time with your family.
So you have ongoing events there all the time?
Well, we do some other charitable type activities. We've got a small reservoir that's able to hold water that's gravity fed for our alfalfa fields as well as just the general industrial operation there. And in the meantime, that reservoir, it's got some fish in it, and we have some canoes and kayaks and some things that people can get on. But we've done a lot with Boy Scouts of America and some other youth groups that have come up and participate with, camping and that kind of thing in the area.
Good stuff. And maybe we should have talked about this at the beginning of the show, but how did Western Elite get started? What brought you to Nevada?
Well, we're all natives, actually, from Nevada. In fact, I've grown up here for many years. In fact, my father was the mayor of North Las Vegas for 16 years. A lot of people know of Jim Seastrand. But with that background, I was in the property development business and ended up with my partners that we started working on some recycling elements, and it stretched into running the dumpster trucks as well as opening up the material recovery facility. So we've been operating since the very end of 2005, and I think we've become a pretty integrated part of Southern Nevada now. And if anybody sees our blue containers with a big WE on the side, they'll know that that's a local Nevada company that is trying to improve things here in our valley and the way we do things.
And we do want to support our local businesses, don't we, Stan?
Oh, yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah, and basically, the ranch, the landfill you were telling me is the third largest in the state. Did that start as a ranch and then built around that? Or
yeah, the ranch has been a long-going project that the Williams family has worked on, and they've put just a lot of energy into trying to develop it, and that's the area that we do the Christmas Express activity on. But the industrial side of the property there, it's close. If you've heard of Coyote Springs, we're located close to Coyote Springs. Mm-hmm. And so the industrial side of it has just grown over time over the last 12 years. And it's just been a case of doing the right things, taking care of our customers, and
finding solutions for people. Yeah.
Finding solutions. And in fact, some of those recycling solutions. And so the ranch itself has been a great place to be able to accomplish some of that.
Tremendous. Yeah, it's neat to see the urban-rural connections there, that they're working together and creating a bigger
And how about
ecosystem.
future plans? Where's Western Elite headed from here?
Well, at this point, I think we're going to continue to do as well as we can to service our many loyal customers. We are hopefully demonstrating our loyalty to them as much as they are to us. And we feel like we have a great partnership with our contractors here in the valley, as well as personal homeowners that decide to want to recycle their construction debris that comes from their home, and they just have to call or to get the phone number. I won't go over the number, but just westernelite.com, and they could find a way to contact us or even make an order over the internet. But we're looking at another location right now, and by expanding the opportunity for people to work with us and getting more sites, then we're more efficient. We can keep our costs down. We can continue to add, what value we can for what we are doing. And so currently our expansion is for what we believe to be here in Southern Nevada.
Good stuff. And we want to thank you for being on the show and helping promote recycling and sustainability in the valley. And we want you to keep us in mind when these events come up in December as veterans and family men. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Paul
This is Shades
and Stan.
of Green.
Pleasure.
And keep it green out there, and we'll talk to you next week.